President Samia Suluhu Hassan arrived in Nairobi today for a two-day state visit. Her meeting with President Uhuru Kenyatta signaling a departure from the hardline stance of her predecessor, the late President John Pombe Magufuli. Now, President Suluhu has said that her administration is willing to work closely with Kenya, with both presidents agreeing to build more interconnecting infrastructure, starting with a gas pipeline and roads. On Front Row tonight, we focus on the bilateral ties between the two countries that have been on a journey marred with both bumps and unity. Tough love it's been. What lies ahead for this relationship? What are the opportunities to be grabbed and lessons to be learnt? We will be dissecting these issues for you on this episode of The Front Row as we take a look at the two-day state visit by the Tanzania's President Samia Suluhu Hassan. I am Akisa Wandera. Thank you for joining us, and to quickly introduce our guests. Dr. Kigen Morumbasi is the chairperson of the International Relations Society of Kenya and a lecturer in international relations at the School of Humanities and Social Sciences at the Strathmore University, as well as a visiting lecturer at the Rwanda Defense Force Command and Staff College. Joining us to just help us dissect some of these issues. Thank you, Dr. Kigen, for joining us. We also have Kwame Owino, who will be starting us off, and is the Chief Executive Officer of the Institute of Economic Affairs, as well as an economist. Kwame undertakes and oversees research in IEA Kenya's key policy areas on public expenditure and revenue analysis, international trade, economic regulation, devolution, and the use of future methodologies to inform public affairs in Kenya. And we'll be starting off with him to just take a look at the trade ties, what can be salvaged, what do we expect to see from some of the agreements signed today, what are the likely impacts. Kwame will be speaking to us about that. Kwame, thank you for joining us. And finally, we have Nicodemus Minde, who's a foreign policy expert. He's pursuing his doctoral studies in international relations at USIU Africa. Also holds a master's degree in international relations from the same university. Thank you for joining us. And hopefully later we will be able to have Peter Mathuki, who's the Secretary General of the East African Community. He'll likely be joining us later on the program. Thank you for joining us. I would actually... Well, so a lot has happened today. It's been a bevy of activities in the country. Just taking a look at what's been happening. The president making her first trip to the country. Of course, her maiden trip was in Uganda. And then she's landed here next. A number of the conversations she had and agreements she had with President Uhuru Kenyatta were on trade. And I'd like to pick up that conversation now with Kwame Owino. Kwame, very good evening to you. Thank you for joining us. Among the biggest news of the day, Kenya and Tanzania signing a deal for transportation of liquefied petroleum gas via pipeline from Mombasa to Dar es Salaam. And that's an agreement made between the two countries. What are your thoughts? What are we likely to see from this?
Well, I think, as you mentioned, the first trip by President Suluhu was in Uganda. And at that meeting, one of the things that was announced was the construction of a pipeline through Uganda and into Tanzania. And many Kenyans felt that that was a loss for Kenya, partly because there's an expectation that the pipeline could pass through Kenya as well, into Uganda and into South Sudan, but that didn't happen. I think it's clear that the decisions for that pipeline was made entirely on the basis of solid economics. It made more sense, especially because Uganda wanted to have a say by virtue of the fact that its oil quantum is much, much higher than Kenya's. There was no justification for Kenya's quantity of oil to actually justify trying to monopolize basically that. It seems that President Suluhu is saying, look, if we get real, there are also some businesses that can be done with Kenya, and obviously a pipeline extracting or evacuating liquefied petroleum gas could be extended through Kenya's borders right into southwards into Tanzania. I think because Tanzania itself also has deposits of gas and all the way connecting back to Mozambique, it's just about making the best use of available resources, but also efficient mechanisms for trading natural resources, but also building infrastructure commonly that helps across borders. So that's a very good signal.
Mm-hmm. Well, what are we likely to see? So then if this comes to life, what would it mean?
Yes.
Is it a game changer?
Well, at least it gives Kenya some play in the construction of the pipeline, because obviously the pipeline that was heading west definitely is not possible anymore. Kenya has very low petroleum, and it's been concluded on the other side. But that means that yes, common infrastructure for liquefied petroleum gas and for petroleum fuels is actually something that happens across countries. I mean, it's one big one in Europe, in many parts of Central Asia. It's the norm. So with both countries participating, the possibility of cross-border trade in liquefied petroleum gas is useful. But also in the meantime, obviously, because Mombasa has capacity to extract and to evacuate, it is possible that it might go that way until Tanzania develops its own petroleum, natural gas reserves which are available, and then probably Kenya would not have to import from the Middle East and other parts of the world, but would actually get it from within. So anything that promotes trade and the creation of good markets within East Africa is commendable, and I think that is what the signal is here. It's a good thing either way.
Mm-hmm. Kenya has largely been seen to have missed out on the oil pipeline deal that Tanzania then decided to go with Uganda on this. Among the reasons and factors that led to this were, ways of doing business. The cost was said that it would be largely expensive to do the Kenya route. So do we expect Kenya perhaps to behave differently with this particular project?
Okay. As I said, Akisa, there was no economic justification given Kenya's oil quantum to actually have that pipeline pass through Kenya. For those reasons, I mean, as we said, Uganda has a far higher, smaller population, but far higher natural reserves, or rather confirmed reserves of petroleum. Now, it looks as if, on a business case basis, Tanzania has petroleum, has natural gas, which is a cleaner oil, is a cleaner fuel, which Kenya should be interested in because Kenya imports quite a bit, and Kenya is trying to expand the use of natural gas for energy production, but also for household use and for other industrial uses. Because Tanzania has reserves down to the south, constructing that pipeline through that southern route from Kenya actually makes more sense. So in my view, I think what I have to say is African countries are known to engage in big infrastructure projects that do not make economic sense. This one makes both economic and political sense, in the sense that it brings two countries to a common table because they've had troubled relations or not perfect relations for a while. The possibility of investing together means that we are, in a way, intertwining our destinies and forcing markets to develop in the best way possible. So yes, first, the other one would not have made as much sense, I think, which would be a waste of resources or diversion. But this one certainly makes quite much sense, and that both presidents think about it shows that we are able to face reality, because economic reality is as important as the political gestures and messages that is sent out.
All right, very good for you to clear that up for us. Now, President Suluhu and Kenyatta have also agreed to remove non-tax related prohibitions on the borders of Tanzania and Kenya to just ensure ease of doing business. This is one of the agreements they made today when they met at State House. Largely, them removing these non-tax related prohibitions, what does that say about the direction we are taking in terms of trade ties between these two countries?
Again, very positive. I think for the reason that the East African community has had some difficult moments, frictions. I mean, many people, depending on which country you come from, they tend to blame, Kenyans blame Tanzanians, Tanzanians blame Kenyans. So there's been political frictions in the last, I think, 4 or 5 years. This is resolving them. The East African Community Treaty is actually a very open treaty. It's, in my view, the most progressive on the continent, and it's a builder. So its successes and challenges are a great pointer to whether the African Continental Free Trade Area, which I'm less enthusiastic about, will work. But the East African Community speaks for itself as a very positive treaty. Now, most of those things that existed, because the taxation things have never been the problem. The problems have been what are called non-tax barriers. And obviously, these administrative rules that come out that are unpredictable and obviously cause a lot of frictions for business people crossing one day, or even citizens just crossing the border. So coming together, I think that was one major item on the agenda. And for this, we have to give credit to both diplomats on both sides for actually focusing on what the real issues are. And for many business people, but even just Kenyans crossing one way or the other, the administrative bottlenecks on those borders as something that had just begun to actually freeze trade. Remember that Tanzania is Kenya's, has one of the longest borders with Kenya. That's first. But Kenya is Tanzania's fifth largest investor, and second, of course, in the EAC. So I think the business logic of resolving all these border issues, especially those that are related to regulations. Remember, they're not related to taxes, because taxes tend to be declared and are very transparent. These ones are not, and they tended to be things that come in one day after the other, and they tend to cause a lot of headache to many people. And I think people then interpret them politically, and it creates unnecessary tension. So that they'll be committed to actually provide an opportunity for this issue to be resolved is itself also a show that this is not just symbolic about a new leader making a tour around the region, but actually focusing on the issues, and that both countries have gotten to the crux of the matter very, very quickly is something that also gives a positive highlight for this visit.
Well, under the late President Magufuli, Kenya and Tanzania, their relations had really soared, with each country accusing the other of unfair trade practices. And you've touched on the mistrust that has been there between these two countries. With this new regime, so to speak, are we expecting to see a different kind of relations, and especially trade-wise, and how will we both benefit from that?
Okay. About 5 years ago, when people were talking about these tensions, my view has always been this, that the East African community is going nowhere unless Kenya and Tanzania cooperate. Why? Because they're the largest in one way or the other. So one is the largest territorially, the other is the largest in terms of an industrial sector. The logic of fusing markets here and actually opening up to each other is clear, regardless of what the politics and the ideological differences might be. So the view, I mean, as this new administration has started, I think it shows two things. One, traction in the sense that we need to be patient with each other, applying the correct diplomatic language, approaches, and tools is what has got both countries to be where they are. And generally, this is a positive drive for both of them going, as we consider the future of the EAC, which in itself is also one of the leading lights within the African continent. So I think I'm repeating myself, but I'm just saying that there's nothing about this visit so far that doesn't tell me that East Africa community and each of the individual countries on their own have very high prospects. I mean, the best prospects going forward. Remember, both of them are coming from different views about it, from a shock related to COVID, and freezing each other from using markets to actually resolve some of their problems is going to be unduly problematic. So that they are opening up in the way that they are shows that actually they've made huge leaps, and the recovery is bound to be good for not just for them, but for the East African community in general.
Any investments opportunities that both countries can take advantage of as we move forward?
Yes, I see. It's obvious. I think the statement that was issued today recognizes that President Suluhu, for instance, was gracious in saying that, look, Kenya is so important to us that in the sense that it's our largest investor among all East African countries, and the fifth largest globally. So basically, Kenya is a significant one, in addition to the fact that Kenyan investments directly create jobs for 55,000 Tanzanian citizens. I am sure there are investments on this other side as well, but there are also markets. Kenya is a big market for Tanzanian agricultural produce, starting from rice, groceries, onions, and many other things that come on this, in addition to services traded across the borders. Opportunities for investments, especially if investors are sure that some of the non-tariff barriers that we saw and some of the taxes and the arbitrary decisions by customs officials or immigration people are going to be resolved and those tensions will end, those investments are going to rise. And that's probably happening at the right time when both countries need investments, in addition to investments outside the East African community, because many people consider Kenya or Tanzania or the East African countries as one place to locate a business and then to supply the rest of the region. I think it's definitely a positive one, and that those investments will come. I think it's time to actually start to track them closely, but they will come.
Kwame, Tanzania is seemingly changing tack in how they're handling COVID-19, and this formed the basis of their conversation, and we understand that they really did speak about it at length, and they agreed that their health ministers will craft a framework for speedy COVID-19 checks. We know this has been a thorn since the COVID-19 situation began. we saw for about a month, lorries and trucks snaking through kilometers and kilometers away on the borders. So then we expect something different this time round. Talk to us about then the ease of business, especially around the border. And in terms of numbers, if you can, what will this likely translate into?
Okay. I think the first thing is that it is a failure of East African community countries not to have agreed on a standard for testing of COVID, so that certificates could actually be valid across the borders, because that would definitely have eased the huge tail-to-tail backlog that existed for trailers and obviously for trucks that are moving across. It was. So I think in this suggestion, in this meeting, my reading of what they say is that, look, we actually need to agree on a form of a test, which then actually gives a signal that can be trusted, and an authentic certificate that can be trusted across borders for somebody who's taken the test. That's altogether very useful, because every country had its own approach to it, which they're entitled to as a sovereign state. But at the same time, I think for the purposes of movement across the East Africa community, there wasn't a single test that was acceptable across. So if they standardize that, because there are options, but if they standardize that, it makes it even easier, because any Kenyan would know, visiting Tanzania, that if I have this test within 48 hours of my departure or 24 hours of my departure, it will be enough for me to convince an immigration official or somebody else who's making an administrative decision that I have accomplished whatever is required. And if there's a transparency around what are the rules that are required for movement across borders as well, that would be useful for everybody too. So yes, once that happens, of course, the big backlogs that we saw, because Kenya had it as well, it's not completely resolved across the borders with Uganda as well and Tanzania. Being the two main gateways into East Africa, it's clear that resolving this is long overdue.
This newfound relationship, and I know you've mentioned it, but I think this would be my last question to you. Do we expect then a more vibrant ESC because of these two countries finding each other, if I could say that?
I hope so. And this is not necessarily we must be careful not to attribute the freeze that has been in ESC to Tanzania or any other country. I think these are diplomatically difficult things. Some effort has been placed and it seems to have been unlocked. That's a good thing, and let's proceed. But I think it's a good thing. One of the things you know is that the East African Summit, for instance, has not met for a while to process some of its agenda, owing to the fact that it requires consensus and a meeting of all state heads of state, because there are certain decisions within the ESC that the treaty only allows for the heads of state to make. Thereafter, they can delegate implementation decisions. Those are important decisions, and it hasn't met for quite a number of times. If this new impetus that we see, and it's a positive one, maintains, then it's clear that the backlog of issues that need to be resolved around the ESC will happen much quicker. Much quicker. Everybody benefits from that, definitely. So without casting blame, I think President Suluhu's and obviously President Uhuru's these overtures and a meeting of the minds, if they can strike a consensus, it's sure that both of them can lead with the cooperation of Uganda, of course, Rwanda, and the other members of the ESC to resolve many issues, including some of the problems related to Burundi, which is an outstanding thing that I think ESC countries must take leadership on before the AU can step in.
Kwame, thank you very much for speaking to us, at least just unpacking some of the trade issues arising from this maiden visit to Kenya by Tanzania's President Samia Suluhu Hassan, meeting President Uhuru Kenyatta, signing a number of trade deals. So it's a matter of wait and see. We've conversed matters trade and what some of the issues would mean. Kwame, thank you very much. Kwame Owino is the CEO of the Institute for Economic Affairs, as well as an economist, and it was a pleasure having him here. I want us to take a quick break. When we get back, I'm speaking to Dr. Kigen Morumbasi, the chairperson of the International Relations Society of Kenya, and Nicodemus Minde, a foreign policy expert. Let's now get to the diplomacy part of it and the bilateral relations. What do we expect to see, and what does this visit portend for the future of the relations between these two countries? You're watching The Front Road. We'd love for you to be part of this conversation. Text us on 22155, tweet us at Akisa Wandera, at KTN News KE, on your thoughts on the relationship between Kenya and TZ. This new regime, is it going to get better? Will it get worse? Matter of wait and see. Let's take a quick break. We'll be back with more.